All right, folks, we're going to talk about direct and indirect objects today. This is a review from earlier in the year, but we're still struggling with identifying the difference. So I'm just going to do some review with us today. All right. So just remember that the subject of the sentence is the thing that's performing the action. It's the thing that's doing something in the sentence, and that's either going to be a noun or a pronoun, and the verb is the action of the sentence. In order for you to have a direct object, there has to be an action verb. If it is a linking verb, is, am, are, was, were, things like that, you do not have a direct object in that part of the sentence. You would have a subject complement instead. So, the direct object is the word, or in some cases, group of words that follow a verb and answer the question, what did the verb do, or who? Okay, so please note, follows the verb. It comes after the verb. So that's the first thing that you have to put in your head, never before the verb of the sentence. So let's take a look at these examples. We're answering the question, what happened, or who, for what, for whom. So the old man chewed his food. Find the verb. Ask, what did the verb do, or who? The dog dug a hole under the fence. Find the verb. And then Alexander the Great conquered leaders in most of ancient Europe. Find the verb. Ask yourself, who or what did the verb do? So I want you to kind of have an idea in your head about what the answer to each of these are for the direct object. Let's take a look at our answers and see if you were correct. So, chewed is our verb in the first sentence, and you ask, what did he chew? And he chewed food. So our direct object for sentence 1 is food. Dug is our verb in the second sentence, and you ask, what did the dog dig? He dug a hole. So that is our direct object in sentence 2. Conquered is our verb in the last sentence, and what did he conquer? He conquered leaders. Now, you might say, he conquered Europe. Well, we're going to talk about why it's not Europe and why it's the leaders instead. All right, here's some more practice. Let's try. Tommy caught the flu and is at home sick. Find the verb. Figure out what the verb did. My teacher wants my essay. The Seahawks played an amazing game in spite of their loss Monday night. So in each case, find the verb. Ask yourself, who or what did that verb do? And let's see how you did. We caught, what did we catch? We caught the flu. The teacher wanted, what did the teacher want? My essay. The Seahawks played, what did they play? A game. So in each case, these are the direct objects, and notice they come after that verb. Those verbs that have direct objects have a special name, and they're called transitive verbs. Now, in the grand scheme of the world, there might be some language teachers that want you to know this. It's something that can make you sound really impressive when you talk about this. But really, it's just a special name to indicate that a sentence might have a direct object if it tells you that it's a transitive verb. Okay, so it's going to be an action verb for sure, and it's going to have a direct object. And those are the only two qualities that make a verb a transitive verb. Okay, so it's just a vocabulary term that some teacher someday may want you to know. So just kind of put that in the back of your head in that file drawer for grammar vocabulary. All right, let's talk about indirect objects. Honestly, this is where we struggle the most because if you'll remember my description of indirect objects, it is the peanut butter in the sandwich. And the pieces of bread, on one side you've got the verb, on the other side you've got the direct object. The indirect object has to happen in between. Okay, if it's after the verb, it is not an indirect object, and we'll talk about that. So, indirect object answers, once you know what the verb did, you ask who did it for, okay, or who we gave it to, kind of thing. So let's take a look. After the class, I wrote her a note. Find the verb. The verb is wrote. What did I write? I wrote a note. That's my direct object. Now you ask to who, for who. And that's your indirect object. Next sentence, my cousin brought us freshly picked vegetables, sorry. Find the verb. Ask who or what got the action of that verb. And then look in between the verb and the direct object to find who or what received that direct object. Last sentence, loud music gives my brother headaches. Find the verb. Ask yourself, what's receiving the action? For who? Let's take a look at some answers. So first is to find the verb. They are in the circle. I wrote. What did I write? I wrote a note. Who did I write it for? Her. Her is my indirect object. My cousin brought. What did my cousin bring? Vegetables. That's the direct object. Who did my cousin bring them for? Us. Indirect object. Music gives. What does it give? It gives headaches. Who does it give it to? My brother. So notice that in each of these sentences, it is a peanut butter sandwich with the peanut butter in the middle. Let's try these. Hannah sent me an email. Ben's sister made the team a pitcher of lemonade. Johnny Depp gave me his autograph. So in your head, find the verb, find the direct object, look back and find the indirect object. Please remember, you can't really find an indirect object unless you know what the direct object is. And no sentence is going to have an indirect object without a direct object. You can have a sentence with just a direct object, but you cannot have a sentence with only an indirect object. Okay? So take a minute, find where you think the indirect object is in each of these sentences. You have to find the verb first, then the direct object, then look back and find the indirect object. Let's see how you did. Hannah sent. What did she send? She sent an email. Who did she send it to? Me. Ben's sister made. What did she make? A pitcher. Okay, not lemonade. The direct object is pitcher. Reason of lemonade is a prepositional phrase, and a direct object cannot be in a prepositional phrase. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. Okay, so she made a pitcher. The pitcher had stuff in it, and there's further explanation. Who did she make it for? The team. Johnny Depp gave something. What did he give? He gave an autograph. Who did he give it to? Me. Indirect objects. Those are, let's see, intransitive verbs are action verbs that do not have a direct object. Okay, so it's just the opposite of a transitive verb. We haven't seen any examples of that. All of the sentences we've seen so far were transitive verbs with direct objects and indirect objects, or just direct objects. But so if you look at this, huffing and puffing, we arrived at the classroom door with only 7 seconds to spare. The arrived is the intransitive verb. Because we didn't arrive, nothing received that action. At the classroom door, prepositional phrase. With only 7 seconds to spare, prepositional phrase. Can't have a direct object in a prepositional phrase, intransitive verb. James went to Campus Cafe for a steaming bowl of squid eyeball stew. Yuck. James went, but we've got prepositional phrases. To the Campus Cafe for a steaming bowl of squid eyeball stew. 3 prepositional phrases in a row, no room for a direct object. So, and that's what this is trying to tell us, okay? When an indirect object is in a preposition, it becomes the object of the preposition and not an indirect object. So in the first example, after class, I wrote her a note. What did I write? I wrote a note. Who did I write it for? Her. Her is the peanut butter. But in the second example, same idea, but now I don't have an direct object anymore. After class, I wrote, what did I write? I wrote a note, that's my direct object, to her, prepositional phrase. Because it's after the direct object, it is no longer an indirect object. So position matters, okay? Position matters. So let's try that. On these sentences, I want you to decide, is there an indirect object or is there an object of the preposition? And the underlines are kind of in the right place, not all of them. So Walker gave the bone to the dog. The verb is gave. Do we have an indirect object? I tutored my sister for her math test. Tutored is our verb. Look for the direct object. Do we have an indirect object? On Thanksgiving, my mother prepared us a feast. Prepared is your verb. Figure out what was prepared. Do you have an indirect object? On Halloween, my family gave candy to the neighborhood children. Gave is the verb. Figure out what was given. That's your direct object. And then decide if there's an indirect object. And the last example, the middle school sent the shelter 500 cans of food. Sent is our verb. What was sent? Is there an indirect object? So take a minute, figure out your indirect object answers, figure out which ones are prepositions instead, and let's see. Okay, so the third sentence, my mother prepared, what did she prepare? She prepared a feast. Who did she prepare it for? Us. And in the last sentence, the middle school sent. What did they send? Tricky one. They sent cans. Remember, of food, prepositional phrase, that is not our direct object. Who did they send the cans to? The shelter. In the other three examples, we have prepositional phrases instead of indirect objects. We gave, what did we give? A bone to the dog. If it said Walker gave the dog a bone, then we would have an indirect object. I tutored my sister. My sister is direct object for her math test. Not an indirect object. It is the object of a preposition instead. And in the last example, on Halloween, my family gave candy to neighborhood children. I gave, what did I give? Candy to neighborhood children. If I had said, on Halloween, my family gave the neighborhood children candy, now I have an indirect object. All right, so those are just a couple of tricks to help you find direct objects, indirect objects, and when they aren't those things, but are something else, like a prepositional phrase or things like that. All right, review this as many times as you need to until it starts to click, guys. This is a toughie and we don't use it all the time, so it's something you need to revisit. Thanks, guys.